No, we don't exist only to be in a state of happiness. Uh, we exist to make a difference in the world. And when that goes well, we also feel happy, but that's a side effect. When we
Mm.
do what's right, we we get to feel good. Most of the time, again, there's no guarantee, so it can't be instrumentalized. You can
Mhm.
say, "Oh, do something meaningful in order to feel better." Frankl used to say, "The more we chase happiness, the more we chase it away."
Welcome to Oxygen for Educators, part of the Ripple Maker Project. I'm one of your hosts, Michelle Kinder, and you'll meet Chris Kent Phelps in just a bit. It's our hope to bring you thought-provoking, unscripted conversations full of actionable ideas to fuel your important work in the world. Thanks for tuning in. This space is for you. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm good. I'm 10 out of 10 excited about our interview with Alex Vesely, Viktor Frankl's grandson, and just hoping that what he has to share today really does give a little lightness and reorientation to folks that are listening. It certainly did that for me.
Love that. I feel the very same way.
Tell everyone a little bit about Alex and what the interview is about.
I would be honored to. Okay, so Alex Vesely is a filmmaker, a licensed psychotherapist, and logotherapy trainer. And as you mentioned, he is also the grandson of Viktor Frankl, one of the greatest gifts to the world. He's based in Vienna, and he travels globally speaking on logotherapy, the meaning-centered school of psychotherapy founded by his grandfather. Alex also founded in 2020 the Viktor Frankl Institute of the Americas, and we'll talk a little bit about that during the interview. As most of us know, Viktor Frankl was a doctor, a Holocaust survivor, the author of 33 books, including the best-selling book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I would just like to add that having Alex on this podcast is such an honor. It is a love letter to educators because their profession is so firmly grounded in meaning. So it's my hope, and I think yours, that our listeners in education will walk away having an added appreciation for themselves and also the way that they live their lives. And then for anyone who has maybe veered from meaning because of the difficult circumstances that our listeners are working in, we hope that this moves them back to their center and to their meaning.
Fantastic. And Alex is also a new dad and married to a teacher.
Yes, yes.
So
yes.
I love your language of a love letter to educators. That's so lovely.
Awesome.
Let's hear it.
Let's do it.
Well, welcome everyone. Chris is with me today to interview Alex because we were both so overwhelmed and excited about this opportunity that we thought it would be better if the three of us got to talk together. So welcome, Alex. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for inviting me.
And Alex, for the few people on the planet who don't know about your extraordinary grandfather, Viktor Frankl, can you tell us a little bit about his life's work?
Well, yeah, most people know him as the author of the book Man's Search for Meaning. Oftentimes when I meet people, they say, "Oh, I read your grandfather's book," and then sometimes I tease them a little bit and say, "Which one?" Because he wrote several books, but he's mostly known for this one, which is interesting because he didn't really see that as his most important work at all. But it was, of course, a very personal work where he described his experiences that he had in different Nazi concentration camps in the time of the Nazi era. And so it was a personal account, but also the original title was A Psychologist Experiences the Concentration Camp. So already he was looking at it from a professional view, so to speak, removed as a scientist, to explore What can we learn in such a situation? What's the true nature of human beings? And especially, what can we learn about how it is possible to deal with unimaginable suffering, which is a universal theme. And one that he certainly encountered throughout his life, because he was a doctor, a neurologist and psychiatrist, and he was always, very early on, he knew that he wanted to be a doctor and that he wanted to help people. And it was the time when psychology and psychotherapy became it was the time when that sparked in Vienna. Sigmund Freud, everybody knows that name. And young Viktor was fascinated by Freud's teachings and his ideas and about the unconscious mind and how it influences us and our decisions. And so he wanted to be a psychiatrist early on and explore the human mind and feelings and everything that's connected with it. And so to cut a long story short, he would call himself a doctor, and he would explore new ways of thinking about human existence and what actually makes a big difference in some people who seem to do very well in life. And you look at their lives and you see sometimes their lives are actually very difficult, and they experience lots of adversity and maybe tragedy, and yet their lives turn out well. And then you see other people who have comparatively relatively easy lives, where one would say, well, this is, this person has a great fortune and gift and lots of talents maybe and good parents, and yet their life, they falter in life and they're unhappy, and in extreme cases even take their lives. So he looked at that and said, what's the difference? And he came to the conclusion that the main factor is meaning, the perspective of meaning. If I see a meaning in my life, in what I do, if I'm oriented towards meaningful goals that are outside of myself, that are real, that exist in the world, and I serve these goals, and that can be another person. So a goal can be a task or another person. And if I am directed towards this goal and moving towards the realization of this meaningful task, that is a protective factor, and that keeps me from being vulnerable to all the challenges that come with every life. There's no life where suffering is not a part of it. And suffering hits us all in one form or another. But how can we prepare people, make them stronger? Nowadays we talk about resilience. So this was all about resilience. He didn't call it resilience, he called it Leidensfähigkeit, ability to suffer. What strengthens people to endure those difficult times better? And he saw that it was meaning. And that's the big topic of his life. And so he founded a meaning-centered therapy, logotherapy. Silly name because you don't know what it is about unless you speak ancient Greek. But logos means meaning or the word, and so that's how that came to be. And he's known as the founding father, so to speak, of that school in psychotherapy.
And his life stress test that concept in a way that no one else can touch, which I think is why Man's Search for Meaning strikes a nerve in everyone that reads it. But you're right. Every single one of us has that experience of where something going on in our inner world either makes what's happening more or less tolerable. And talk to us about what he would say his most important work is, if it wasn't Man's Search for Meaning.
Well, you can actually read it in Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about the manuscript of his then life's work, where he had put all his insights and everything he had learned from his patients, originally from his teachers, Sigmund Freud and Alfred Adler, but later he dismissed those and he said, I think it's too abstract what they're talking. I want to learn from the people who actually live it. And he learned from his patients. And he put all of that in his first book, Ärztliche Seelsorge in German. It was later published in English under the name The Doctor and the Soul. And that's where the foundations of his logotherapy and existential analysis, which is kind of the background, the theoretical background, the philosophical background of logotherapy, he put that all in there. And he was very disheartened when he tried to hang on to that manuscript because he knew he had found something that's important, that can help a lot of people. And so he wasn't so much about his own danger to his own life, which was tragic enough, but he thought, if at least my manuscript should survive. And he tried to hang on to that, but he had to throw it away when he entered Auschwitz. And even in the camps, later on, when he was suffering from typhoid fever and he knew he had to keep himself awake one night, he started reconstructing this very manuscript on little sheets of paper that somebody had given him, smuggled in. And so that kept him going. This was his meaningful task.
Yeah.
Kept him going.
Chris, I saw you respond to that. I want to make sure you have space to jump in.
I just fell in love with the title. I'd not heard the title of the book, The Doctor and the Soul. Just touched me.
Tell us about your story, Alex, and your work in the world and how you're carrying his legacy forward.
Well, it seems like I don't want to make myself more important than I am. There are a lot of people who carry logotherapy forward. There are a lot of logotherapists, not so much in the United States, interestingly, where he's very well known for the book. Most people know him as a Holocaust survivor, and I think sometimes that kind of overshadows his work. And that what he wanted to be known for, if he wanted to be known for, it wasn't about him, but he wanted his work to be known. And there's kind of a renaissance to logotherapy. I think, like every genius is, and I think it's okay to say that he was a genius. He saw a little further, and he noticed the idea of meaning playing a role in people's lives is nothing new. So he always said, I haven't invented anything that's really new per se. You find the concept of meaning in poetry and literature, in all world religions, even in the old Indian traditions. And for some reason, it didn't get into psychology, at least in the beginning. Freud was off to a different direction, and Adler was off to a different direction. He said, wait a moment. What if a healthy human being is not so much concerned about themselves, but about others or about meaningful tasks? And only if the person doesn't find a meaningful task outside, then they revert back to themselves and they become interested in a lot of pleasure, which was Freud's suggestion, or a lot of power, which was Adler's suggestion. But it's always about the self. And he said, no, originally, primarily, a healthy human being is not so much interested in their own states, in their own well-being, in their own inner equilibrium. But no, they're interested in real things in the world, and in making a difference, and righting a wrong, or in contributing in some way that's meaningful. And only if that doesn't happen for some reason, then people revert to themselves, and it's actually not a healthy thing. And we shouldn't reinforce that by just putting all the focus on how you're feeling in this moment. Right? Are you happy, or are you sad? It's not about that. It's about reasons to feel happy, and those are anchored in the world, in reality. And so, I'm sorry, I strayed off the question. So
no, please stray away.
I was going to say stray away.
And I'm glad there are, because otherwise there would be a lot of responsibilities on just my shoulders. And there are great logotherapists out there, and they have been working for decades. And it's kind of the third generation of logotherapists that are carrying the work forward now. But it's not mainstream. So a lot of people haven't heard about logotherapy. But they're getting more, and there the other schools of psychotherapy that exist too, and I think in the US it's mainly behaviorist. It was for a long time. They have also started to realize, wait a minute, meaning is kind of a factor, so they now kind of put it in somewhere, at least. So that's a whole different time. That was very different at the time when he was working, or even in my youth. I grew up here in Vienna, and I had psychology as a class in high school, right? And the books for that class were printed in Vienna. The name Frankl was not even in the index. It was not even in the index. We're talking 1990s. That's unimaginable today. And again, I mean, it wasn't about him. It wasn't, ego, but people couldn't benefit from his work here in Austria. And now that has changed, and it's changed around the world. There's a lot of interest in logotherapy now. And he saw a little further. He had some ideas that he put in his books. It's 33 books altogether, and so the ideas are out there, and people have elaborated, expanded on them. He just kind of put the foundation there, and now logotherapy is used in a lot of context, like family therapy, couples therapy, addiction, all these areas where meaning, or should we say the absence of meaning, makes a big difference.
I mean, I can't think of a more relevant topic in today's destabilized world, where the sort of like pull toward pleasure, pull toward power, or pull toward meaning is just like in technicolor when you just look out and see what's happening in the world. So it makes me feel hopeful that it is going to just get more and more ground, that it covers and captures more and more people's imagination as people have to, we're sort of forced right now to find stabilizing forces in a pretty unstable world. And our audience is primarily educators. So I'm super curious if there's a takeaway or two that you think, the work of my grandfather, the work of all this three generations of logotherapists, this is a takeaway or two that would really serve educators.
Yeah. Well, that ties in with what you just said. I think he would disagree that logotherapy has to add something that isn't there. He would say the orientation, the main motivation in everybody's life is meaning, whether we know it or not, or don't, right? So this search for meaning, this orientation beyond the self and actually beyond the feelings and states one is in, onto the world and other people and meaningful tasks is already there. We don't need to put it there. Sometimes it's kind of covered with dust, or people are indoctrinated. I would use that word even to think differently and to say, no, it's not about that. It's just about, you and what's in it for you, and keeping your boundaries and not experiencing too much stress, because that is bad. And basically it's the exact opposite of what he says. If you are oriented towards meaning and doing something that's meaningful, that kind of stress that comes from that source is not just not damaging you. On the contrary, it's even preventing disease of any kind. It's strengthening you, because first of all, you invest time in reaching that, in serving that task, so you don't have time to experiment with other behaviors that might not be healthy or that might be extreme, and sometimes even have the origin in this, what he called existential vacuum, this not knowing, should I do this or that with my life? And that sometimes comes with so many possibilities, where we'd say, we should be glad that we have more possibility. Most of us have more possibilities than all our previous generations have had, and we have more time at our hands, and we have plenty of choices. Well, that's a good thing, and we don't, we're grateful for that, and we don't want to turn back time, not at all. But sometimes this also makes it more difficult to choose. And we start thinking, if I do this, what effect is that going to have on me? And that's already where this kind of neurotic edge comes in, where it's where we start thinking not only about, is this good, what I'm doing? Is this meaningful? Is this something that needs to be changed in the world, and kind of calling me because I know how to change it, right? But what effect is that going to have on me? How am I going to be viewed if I do this? What happens if that goes wrong, if that goes sideways? What will others think of me? This kind of thinking, which is kind of driving us away from meaning, because fear is a great preventer when it comes to this pursuit of meaning. But on the other hand, if we find something and if we follow that meaning, and if we try to fulfill it, there's a side effect that comes with it usually, and that's happiness, that's fulfillment. Knowing what I'm doing is good. If I, look at if I let the day pass in my inner mind at the end of the day, and I can say I did something, I contributed in a meaningful way, and the world's a little better, or someone's life is better because of what I did today. Those are the things that are even more. They're dimensionally more than just superficial pleasure. They're happiness in the sense they are fulfilling. And so whatever we do, whatever we put into this world, however we act into this world, also tells something about ourselves. It also rubs off on ourselves, if you like. And so that, I think, would be the most, what I say, it's a dangerous time in that there's so many ways that we can distract ourselves from what's truly important, and be misguided by oftentimes psychologists, or psychologism rather to say, which is not taking into account the that aspect. Still, 100 years after Frankl put it out there, the aspect of, no, we don't exist only to be in a state of happiness. We exist to make a difference in the world. And when that goes well, we also feel happy. But that's a side effect. When we do what's right, we get to feel good. Most of the time, again, there's no guarantee. So it can't be instrumentalized. We can say, oh, do something meaningful in order to feel better. Frankl used to say, the more we chase happiness, the more we chase it away. Right? It's something you cannot pursue in and of itself, but you have to take kind of the detour of fulfilling something that's meaningful, and then the side effect of happiness and fulfillment will come to you. And I think it's young people already who get that. So the search for meaning, that wanting to find a fulfillment and meaning in life, that's already there in young people. And that's nothing that needs to be bestowed or handed down from others. There's a big misunderstanding that often pops up. It's that when people say, oh, Frankl was a doctor who prescribed meaning, right? Who gave meaning. And that was always one of the first things right out of the gate he would say when he was speaking somewhere. He said, no, meaning cannot be given. It's not the task of the logotherapist or even the parent or the educator to give meaning. Meaning can only be found, and it can also not be prescribed. It can be described at best. You can kind of show children as a way of being a good example of someone who does fulfill meaning, how it's done, and hope that they will accept it. But it has to be found, and it's actually a right and a good sign of maturity if children, if young people don't accept the traditions and values and maybe recipes, right, that are handed down from previous generations. They don't accept that, and they shouldn't accept that. And if they do accept that, well, then hopefully because it aligns with what they themselves find is most meaningful, that can happen. But usually there's a healthy resistance to someone imposing their values and their ideas of what someone else should be doing on them. So he would acknowledge that this search is there, and what also happens sometimes is that, especially in the youth, there's impatient. They're impatient. Sometimes you don't see it, and how can you when you're 14, 15? Like, I didn't know where I wanted to go with my life, right? And so to ask this question, does my life have a meaning? Yes or no? Does life have a meaning at all? Yes or no? And if so, what do I want to be the theme of my life? Which direction do I want to take? Where do I want to bring myself in and make a difference? To not know that instantly is normal. And with a little patience, and not giving up the search, which also happens sometimes, that people say, okay, I didn't find it, so I'm not going to move at all, right? To say, okay, I will keep going, and I will keep searching to recognize this search as something good. Oftentimes, that was half of the job as a therapist that I did with young people, saying, "Yeah, it's nothing wrong with you, and you are frustrated now because you haven't found it yet. And I'm not going to do anything against that frustration because there's nothing wrong with you. And actually, the fact that you're frustrated is a sign of your maturity, and that puts you in the same group as the biggest philosophers that ever walked the earth, because they too were asking those big questions, those existential questions of what do I want my life to stand for ultimately."
Wow. And just like normalizing and celebrating that instead of trying to like turn the pressure release valve immediately with all the different substances or TV or distractions or anything that kind of takes us out of that productive social media. Yeah.
Which reinforces this cycle of how am I seen from outside, right? Which is so dangerous. That should not be a factor at all in what we do. If it's right, it's right, no matter what the world thinks. If it's wrong, it's wrong, even if nobody knows it and everybody thinks I'm great. If I've done something wrong, that doesn't make it better. It kind of, reality is not changed by how it's viewed. And there was a time when, I don't know, smoking was considered great, but it never was. And so what are the truths that I want to find in my life, and the conclusions that I draw, and the way that I want to make a difference in this world.
Hi, I'm Katie Worden, producer of Oxygen for Educators. I want to spotlight our sponsor, TackyBox. TackyBox is an elementary school program that pairs innovative content with a tactile tool in daily practice to teach children to self-monitor their own words and actions and their responses to others. It's a proven tool that reduces behavior incidents by 66%. Through daily self-reflection, students build self-awareness, self-regulation, and meaningful connections. TackyBox is a light lift for teachers with a big impact on student well-being. Go to tackybox.com to learn more and become a TackyBox district.
I have a question that is not formed, so it's probably going to come out a little muddled, but I really want to hear your thinking about it, and I can imagine our listeners like grappling with this. So I'm going to try, and Chris, you jump in if you can make sense of what I'm saying. For all of us, what is the internal experience? What are like the internal cues that we are living into that deeply personal, meaning-oriented journey versus getting sort of pulled into more cultural norms? Like what could people sort of pay attention to? Oh, this is happening inside me. Perhaps I'm leaning more toward meaning, or this is happening inside me. Perhaps I'm moving away from my own journey and meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So again, logotherapy won't give you anything that you don't already have. So this orientation towards meaning is always there, as I said. You don't need any special education or anybody telling you about it. He compared it sometimes to air, meaning. That is, we usually don't think about it. There are people that are perfectly fine and living happy lives. They've never heard about logotherapy or Viktor Frankl, and they never will, and that's okay. Because meaning, as long as it's there, we usually don't even consciously think about it. But we do think about it when the air gets less, when the air gets thin, when we can't breathe well. Then we're certainly aware of, oh, there's oxygen and it's missing, I need it. And it's the same with meaning. We usually only meet the question of meaning in the negative, when it's lacking, when people say something's wrong, I feel this inner void, this emptiness, I don't know why I'm getting up every morning. It can be it can be in the face of being overwhelmed and saying, this is too much, my life is like too difficult. Why should I go on? Because it's so uncomfortable right now. But it can also be the opposite. It can also be if we're not challenged enough, and see, okay, well, everything's going so well. My grandfather often read from a letter that he got from a young student in the U.S., and he often started with it, and I know it by heart because he read it so often. He said, the letter said, "I'm a 22-year-old with a car, degree, and the availability of more sex and more power than I need." So you have Freud and Adler in there, right? Sex and power. But now,
Well
all I
played.
want to know is, what is it all for? Or what does it all mean? Right? So the question of meaning, but if we have everything we need to live from, we still have not answered the question yet of what we live for. And all that Frankl did was he said, this is even more important. This comes even first. So it's the exact opposite. If you're familiar with Abraham Maslow, for example, and the pyramid or the hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
and what we supposedly all need: safety and food and shelter, and then a good environment and education, whatever. And then if all that is arranged, then we can do something meaningful. And in his case, we would say self-actualization, which again puts the self, so it's kind of reconnecting that with the neurotic feeling idea of, oh, we're just here to kind of make ourselves happy or important. No, and Frankl, actually they knew each other and they were friendly with each other, and he told him, Mr. I think you're wrong with this pyramid. It's actually upside down.
He
Because
would flip
I
it.
could even see that in the camps where there was no safety and there was no food, and you wouldn't know if you were going to survive the day. But then meaning became, it was even more important, central. The question of why not give up. Survival isn't a goal in itself. Survival for what? Right? And those who had a for what, given the same circumstances, that's, in the camp, you could die from a lot of things. You were just standing in the wrong place. You were shot, a disease and everything. But all that aside, meaning was the most important factor. Something to look forward to, and to think, okay, for this I'm still important. This is supposed to happen through me, and therefore I have to save myself. And that can be something or someone. So he turned that question around. He describes that in Man's Search for Meaning, where some fellow inmates asked him, "What are we going to do? We're not going to survive this." And he said, maybe it's not about what we expect from life, but what life expects from us. And we're the ones who are answering. And this is a very difficult question that we're now being asked by life. How do we respond? And we always have that freedom to choose how we respond. We don't get to choose the questions. It's like in school. Some kid gets the easy question, you get the difficult one, right? But we don't get the grades. We didn't get the grades by the severity of the questions, but by our answers, the quality of our answers. And there are people who have very easy questions. I mentioned that in life, and they respond in a very meaningless way. And there are people who have very difficult tasks in their lives, and challenges and tragedies and suffering. And their responses are telling so much about them that they become kind of these beacons and of humanity, and also show us, it's possible to meet a difficult fate in this way, and with bravery and with dignity. Those things we can choose, and he pointed those things out, and he tried to describe the human being and the fact that we can also not predict someone's behavior or our own. We have this freedom of will, which is not always accepted, not in all schools of psychotherapy. Not everyone believes that. Logotherapy is a very non-deterministic philosophy, right? So we have this freedom of will, and so we can choose the way we respond, and we can do so freely. And maybe someone has been a terrible person all their lives, but they can decide, from now on I'm going to do different. I will change now, and I will do differently. So that's also a part of what humans can do. They can decide. We can always decide, who do I want to be from now on, in the next, from this day on. Do I want to stay the same, or do I want to change?
it's interaction by interaction, moment by moment, that power to choose how you want to show up and what's going to guide you.
Yes. What do I choose? How do I respond? And
Yeah.
I think it's a very life affirming, a very respectful way to look at human existence, giving us that freedom. And with that freedom comes responsibility. That's why he so often said, when he was talking to an American audience, he would say, maybe it would be a good idea to supplement that Statue of Liberty you have on your East Coast with a Statue of Responsibility, which you could put on the West Coast, because those go together. You can't separate them. If we have the freedom to make a choice, the quality of our choices matter, and we can become guilty by acting against meaning, or we can do our best and serve a meaningful goal, and that has an effect on who we are and on the world. And it's the opposite of guilt, so it's an achievement.
I feel like our listeners, by and large, lean in the direction of being very purpose-driven, very meaning-driven, and they're naturally swallowed up by the stressors of present day and what's happening in the education system and whatnot. So I'm hoping that they're hearing your words as an invitation to go back to their center and find solace and comfort in living from that already very natural place for educators of being driven by their why and driven by serving others. And what's coming up for you, Chris?
Exactly that. But I hope that was coming through. That's something, Alex, most of the educators that we've interviewed on this podcast, they'll have a moment in the discussion where they think about the kids, and you can see like their countenance shift, and they'll reference that, they're in this for the kids.
Yeah.
And so I just agree with that, what you said. And then all the things, budgets and reporting and testing and all those things get in the way. But that's part of the purpose of this podcast, is to help connect them back to their why.
I know a little bit about that because my wife is a teacher. So
Oh, okay.
Yay. Oh, fantastic. What does she teach?
sports and English.
Oh, wonderful. What age?
I think 11, 12-year-olds.
So she's right in the middle of it.
Right in the
Love
middle.
it.
Right now she's taking a sabbatical because of a young son. But yeah, it's,
Congrats.
thank you. I agree. I mean, it's such a meaningful profession where it's so obvious what the meaningful thing is to do. And I think I was just saying molding young minds, right? Although molding is already kind of this idea that maybe we have more influence than we think. They have a mind of themselves, but the multidimensionality of the human being, that's what was a concern for Frankl, for others to realize that we are more than just the body and the mind, which is IQ and emotions, right? But there's something essentially more about a human being.
Okay, so that concludes part 1. Just a reminder to our listeners, we'll be back next week to hear more from Alex, but we wanted to pause it here, like a little interlude, and unpack some of what he had to share, because there's just so much in his content and in his delivery, and we wanted to highlight and underline some things. So tell me what popped for you. What's on your heart after listening to that?
I mean, there are so many things. The first thing that came to mind was his contrast between someone who has a seemingly easier set of circumstances in life and falters versus someone who has a difficult set of circumstances in life and thrives. And I thought a lot about, educators see both sides, both versions every single day in their classroom. And I love the thought that meaning is a protective factor that keeps you from falling victim to the difficult circumstances in life.
Yeah, that was very striking. And he even took it further and talked about the kind of stress that we experience when we're living in purpose and living toward that meaning lens and meaning orientation, that stress, while it might be very challenging, is not bad for us in the same way. And it can even be a protective factor because we're so poured into what we're here to do that we're not engaging in other things that might be harmful to us. I thought that was such a reorientation from the dominant narrative in our culture around self-care and I believe in that, so it's not, it doesn't discount it for me, but it just like reorients it. It's like, can I say a little bit more? I feel like I'm processing out loud, but maybe that's okay. Because I found that very provocative in a good way. This notion that the narrative in our culture is so tilted right now toward happiness, boundaries, do what's right for you, all of that. And in the nervous system work, that does exist, but it's toward the end of you being in that ventral vagal, safe and connected nervous system state so that you can do your work in the world. So it's kind of understanding that if you get trapped in a survival state, it's hard for you to live into your meaning and purpose. If you are doing the things that make you strong so that you're in that optimal nervous system state, then your gifts to the world just really naturally flow through you and it's not arduous. That's how I put it together in my brain, thinking about it after we talked to him, but it was very provocative in a good way.
That makes perfect sense to me. And I think that's why I said in the introduction, this feels like a love letter to educators, because every single person in education who's come on this podcast, we talk about like the joy that exudes from them, and they have the hardest of hard jobs under the most difficult circumstances right now, but they still show up with that joy because they're so connected to their meaning.
Yeah. I think it's like a very 3D experience for us getting to do these interviews of like, oh, there it is again, person after person. Yeah. So nice.
And even just having done Byron Sanders' interview, and you think about how much work he does in the world every single day, and he's always showing up with that joy. He's so connected to his purpose. So yeah, it's just over and over again.
Yeah, honestly, like you could list every single person.
We could.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is very interesting about Viktor Frankl's work. So many people think he came up with logotherapy post his experience of concentration camps, but he actually was doing this work, and then he had the experience in the concentration camps, which naturally stress tested his theory in a way that none of us can imagine. And then he came out and continued his work. Katie pointed out that he, hold on, I need to find, because she sent us a great quote, that he writes about how suffering is like gas filling a container, that suffering completely fills the human soul and conscious mind, no matter the size or intensity of the suffering. So of course, Viktor Frankl's suffering was something we cannot relate to or imagine, most of us. But if your suffering fills your being, and it matters, even if it's not comparable to his suffering. So I feel like what he lived through stress tested his theory in a way that closes the exits for the rest of us to think, oh, this doesn't apply to me. It forces us to pay attention to, if this worked for someone who lived through the unthinkable, surely it has relevance to me. That is so important. But it's not, he never discounted people's suffering that was less than his. And that, he's just such a gentleman in his view of the human experience.
And if you recall, Alex made the comment just as though it was just a given. We all experience unimaginable suffering. I made that note. He used unimaginable suffering. And that's just such an empathetic statement.
Yeah. He was so empathetic. I went back and looked at a bunch of pictures after we interviewed him, and I could totally see he and his grandfather's faces like merging. It was so interesting.
And I loved learning just about his own search for meaning and how his grandfather didn't push him or force him, or it was just, it's his defined. And that was actually a note that I made just for educators, that they're in such a unique space to help young people understand the pursuit of meaning is everything. And they don't have to do anything because it's not theirs to direct, or it's the student's place to find it. But even just in the questions that are asked, and Alex made the point of thinking about, what do I want my life to stand for ultimately? And I thought, what if in school, instead of asking, what do you want to be when you grow up? What college do you want to go to? How much money do you want to make? The question was, what do you ultimately want your life to stand for?
Whoa. Really different trajectory. And kind of piggybacking on your comment, I thought it was very important how he talked about no one gives you meaning. It's not something bestowed. It's something that's there, whether you're aware of it or not. It's driving your life, whether you're aware of it or not. And sometimes it gets obscured. And I really liked his caution flag of how easily obscured it is in today's culture. And he specifically pointed out social media, but really anything in our culture that asks us to focus more on how someone else might think about us than what we think is right or wrong. I just thought that was like knife through butter. Like, this focus obscures us from our own conscience. Like it cuts us off from our own clarity of what's right and wrong, and paralyzes us from taking action in the world in a way that we know it's what we're here to do. The what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. How someone else sees us or what consequences might come from us taking right action. What I got from his comments were those are non-variables. Like, living in service of meaning means almost like muting some of that and amplifying our own relationship with our own conscience. What a time for that.
Well, and I think the gift of doing this podcast is we're talking to people who have learned how to do that. I mean, we one of the reasons we did this is because we understand, well, putting ourselves in an educator's shoes, you feel overwhelmed, you feel overworked, you feel overburdened. But that's not the message that the people who come on this podcast are projecting. They're not. That was our expectation, but that's not what they're projecting. And it's because they're so close to their meaning. Whoa. And if only we all could be that way, and we could we could not even help kids find their meaning. That's not the right way to say it, but just present the challenge to them to go find their own.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like provide them examples by doing it ourselves.
Right, right.
And then creating the container where they get to do their own exploring. And it's normalized for them if they're frustrated. It's even, he used the phrase, it's a sign of maturity to be frustrated as you look for your work in the world. I love that frame.
And that our message to them should be, there's nothing wrong with you. You just haven't found it yet. Right? Like, which is so encouraging. And I don't think we do that well as a society.
Yeah, it's the opposite of the cultural norms right now. I think we get really scared by discomfort, and then we do everything we can to either mute it, like mute the discomfort, or distract from it, or, all the things.
And on that note, I found it interesting that he talked about logotherapy being mainstream in other countries. It's just not in the United States. I found it hopeful that they started in 2020, the Viktor Frankl Institute of the Americas, and they have created coursework and certifications, and there is, a mission to spread that. But it feels so timely. And one note that I wrote down that he said, a healthy human being is not so interested in pleasure, power, or self, but in righting a wrong, contributing in a meaningful way. And that says a lot, like that thought is not mainstream in our country. It's the opposite. It just explains a lot. And again, there's hope in that this work exists, and it's different in other places. How exciting to get to help bring it here.
And you know how he talked about, like Viktor Frankl saying that meaning is like air. If you have it, if you're already living in that orientation, you don't think about it. You don't explain it like a psychologist. You just live into it day to day to day, interaction by interaction. What I'm wondering is if, first of all, I, like you, I'm not one bit surprised it's not getting the same traction here, because I feel like our cultural norms tilt in the direction of power, pleasure, self, instead of meaning, other, service, all the things. However, the biggest impetus for change is discomfort. Like, we rarely look for an alternative path when things are going well. And right now, many people are finding themselves grappling with existential questions that they could previously ignore. So we could be witnessing a perfect storm in terms of what logotherapy and Viktor Frankl's work has to offer, and the appetite for it in the U.S. over the next few years.
Cheers to that.
Yeah. We'll see, right? Like,
well, we're going to do everything we can to help with that. How about that?
There's some meaning right there. I love it.
This is the year your girl discovers what she loves. She'll make lifelong friends, smile till her cheeks ache, and explore amazing places. She'll try new things, climb higher, and lend a helping hand. She'll change her world, adventuring in ways you never imagined. She'll grow in confidence, turn dreams into reality, and find her voice. And through it all, she'll have big fun. Give your girl the opportunity to grow with Girl Scouts. Visit girlscouts.org/join today.
I know it really got your attention when he talked about flipping Maslow's hierarchy. Can you talk about that?
Yes. And I can even, there's a story in my mind of, I think just if I compare two different decades of life and when I was living with them flipped, a friend of mine commented on the fact I was living with them flipped. And that's the happiest I've ever been. But I think that
Your friend was worried and you were like, no, dude, I'm so happy.
But in hindsight, like revisiting this work, because I had not read these books, and I think I first encountered Alex and Viktor Frankl's work 14 years ago. So it had been a while. So revisiting them, that story kept coming back into my brain. And then when he talked about that Viktor Frankl actually went to Mr. Maslow and said, oh, no, you've got it all wrong. I agree with that. That feels very right, just to my bones. And it also made me think about, while I 100% think that the pay scale for educators should be adjusted, it is off. Yes, we know that.
Period, end of sentence, yes.
But you don't often, nobody that came on our podcast so far has complained about that, because they're living with it flipped. Mm-hmm. And the joy is higher, or I guess the way that he said it, happiness is a byproduct of living in your meaning. So I think educators are the perfect example of the flip.
Yeah. And you brought this up when we were talking to him of how meaning-oriented educators are. My hope is that in hearing this interview, they feel validated for that, right, but also maybe like a little, like some heaviness lifts for them around the fact that the way they are showing up in the world is counterculture. And that doesn't mean it's wrong or broken or in any way flawed. It means it's counterculture. And so perhaps our culture is what needs to shift, not these incredible educators that are pouring themselves into their work, so clear about what they're here to do, showing up interaction by interaction to create the container for the next generation to do the same. More of that, less of the self, power, pleasure, please.
Very well said. Yes. Agreed.
One thing I found in his writing that we didn't talk about in the interview, but I thought might be helpful for listeners, he writes about that there are 3 ways to find meaning in what we do, deeds, actions, and creations. In what we take in, experiences, what is beautiful, what is true, love, etc. And then the third one is in attitudes we adopt, that we always maintain the freedom to be in charge of our attitude, no matter what's coming at us externally. Like that was helpful to me because it can be a little bit hard to kind of grasp all that he means when he says meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm glad you spelled that out. Another thing I loved was maybe it's not about what we expect from life, but what life expects from us. And then we have the power to choose our response. Mm-hmm. And the goal is to choose responsibly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that thought that we can choose differently in any moment. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a it's a supportive thought for restorative practices, or because we're giving people a second chance. You can change at any moment, and all it takes is seeing yourself in someone else's shoes and the ability to understand that and then make a different choice.
Yeah.
So I loved threading those things together.
Yeah, it's so hopeful and it's so respectful. It's so respectful of the fact that we're all on this journey and we all get it right, we all get it wrong, and it's never a closed book. Like, I think his direct quote is, who do I want to be from this point forward? What do I choose? How do I want to respond? Like, those are always open questions. And some answers tilt us toward like a different kind of suffering, the suffering that shows up when we feel cut off from meaning and purpose. And some responses, I liked his frame on resilience. Resilience is the capacity to suffer. So like, it's not, suffering isn't eliminated in any of these scenarios. That's not the goal. The goal is, how do you relate to the suffering, and how do you relate to your work in the world, which changes your relationship to the suffering. That's how I'm grasping it.
When you've decided that question that we talked about, educators asking of young people, when you've answered that question, what do you ultimately want your life to stand for, and you make your choices for how you're going to respond to circumstances in alignment with what you've decided, like, all the stress goes away. The consequences don't matter. You've done what you said you were going to do. I think we talked about this at one point. It's like, you get the internal satisfaction, and you're making your choices based on internal instead of external factors.
And then, how does that person sleep at night as compared to the person that's trying to figure out their North Star by tracking cultural norms, other people's opinions, blah, 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 blah. It's like so much less rooted and grounded than the person that's like, I'm going to get really clear on what my work in the world is. And by work in the world, I don't mean, and I don't think he means like profession necessarily. It could just be the simplest, like, I'm going to try to lighten the load of every person I interact with, even if it's just a smile or, a favor or whatever. It can vary wildly, but if I'm clear about that and I do my best to live into that every day, every interaction, how do I sleep at night? It's really different asks of people.
Very different.
And I also like this as like a lifeboat for these times, because there's so much chaos, there's so much confusion, so much disorientation, that a lot of people are finding themselves paralyzed because you can't even follow the ball. But if you change your gaze to what's my work in the world, why am I here now? And what difference can I make, big or small? And and under what conditions can I do that? Like, that's a really different way to interact with the times we're living in. And I find it to be much more exciting, and also much more humbling, and much more hopeful.
On that note, he said, we don't exist to be in a state of happiness. We exist to make a difference in the world. And so if that's how you're evaluating your day, that's a very different lens.
Yeah. He even went on to say, the more you chase happiness, the more you chase it away. Meaning cannot be given or prescribed. It can only be found.
I'm repeating us in different ways, but there were phrases that Alex said that I just gravitated towards. He said, meaning is already there. It just might be covered with dust. And I just loved that thought. And it's easy to let it get covered with dust because there's so much noise, as you always say.
Yeah. Yes. And it's so different to think of it as there but covered with dust versus it's out there and someone's going to guide me to it or tell me what it is, or, like it makes your internal world and your relationship with your internal world like where the juice is.
And that's the flip, right?
And that's
flipping the pyramid so that you're not looking for that, but that's the Holy Grail, right? Not how much money can I make, what size house do I have? Let me get safe and protected first, and then think about that next. Like, that's a second half of life pursuit. That's not right.
Wow. I feel so grateful to Alex's way of conveying this, and literally it's in his blood, but the depth of his knowledge around this, you can tell it's such a lived experience. But then even though he's that deep in it, he can explain it so plainly that I rewound, if that's even still a thing on a computer, I rewound my 8-track. I went back so many times prepping for our conversation to hear him say something again, because it's almost like poetry the way he speaks. Like, it felt so life-giving even to be in his presence, and I think that's because my nervous system was reacting to his nervous system, which every day, all day long, is seeking to live in service of meaning. And it felt good to me. Like, it was what he said. It was how he said it. It's his presence. Like, all of that had an impact on me. And that extends to the educators that are listening. That's how your students feel you. That's how your colleagues feel you. That's how the parents feel you. Like, it's so extraordinary when you think of the wide, what's the word I'm looking for? Like how, I wish I could see Chris's face. She's like, as if I can tell.
Where are we going, Michelle?
I'm just thinking about how many jobs have a 10th of the capacity to move the needle on these big things compared to educators. It's like a meaning playground, and they're the most well suited for it. We know that from our work with them and from these interviews. It's exactly as you said at the beginning. It's a love letter to educators, a well-deserved love letter to educators.
And a reminder of how, I don't want to say easy it is to impact, but they're on the front lines to really make such a big difference with just a few questions. It's not a whole program, someone has to learn. It's not a whole, and we know there's no bandwidth for that, but it's just in the phrasing of a question. What do you ultimately want your life to stand for? And just send someone off on that, internal search to figure out the answer to that question. And have fun. Have fun and normalize the frustration, because it's a sign of maturity. Whoa. Perfect note to end on for part 1. Listeners will get to hear more from Alex next week, and I can't wait. I also would love to throw in, for anyone who wants to learn more, when I first met Alex 14 years ago, he was working on his documentary, Viktor and I, which is a documentary film he did about the life of his grandfather. It is absolutely phenomenal. You can rent it, I think, for $6 on Vimeo. I've watched it twice again in preparation for our interview with him, and it's phenomenal. So it's there.
It's so lovely. Not unlike our experience with Alex, in that movie, you can really feel how Viktor Frankl's presence as a person impacted the people he interacted with. It's lovely.
And then there's also the course at Viktor Frankl Institute of the Americas.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see you next week, and we appreciate you subscribing and rating and reviewing, sharing it with your friends. Big thanks to Katie, goddess of light, love, and productivity, as you all know. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Michelle.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Oxygen for Educators.
Please like, share, and follow, and if inclined, leave us a 5-star review so that we can keep making content for you. Let us hear from you if you know someone we should interview or a topic we should cover.